We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. So, welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Christy Murray. She is a certified neuro coach. And here's some of the topics we're going to talk about I find really interesting. Is defining the covert narcissistic mothers. I had one. The definition between overt and covert narcissism. And then how can Christian neuro coaching help in defining and recovering from generational trauma? We are going to get into generational trauma, which is definitely a thing for sure. So welcome, Christy. Thank you for being on the podcast today. So tell us a little bit first about what a certified neuro coach is.
So certified neuro coach is, the best way I can explain it is we are able to get down to your limiting beliefs. We call it ants, your queen ants, your automated negative thoughts. If you're seeing this pattern in your life, whether it's your productivity, your accomplishments, or your relationships, that, okay, this is always happening and why? Most likely there's these repeated thoughts in your head that, okay, you don't deserve that, you're not good enough. So for neuro coaching, we get down deeper, like where is it coming from? So we ask a series of questions to kind of, really dig down to the root cause of it. And then once we find that, then we try to break the automations by rewiring your brain.
I've done that. So it's a form of NLP, right? Neuroplasticity, kind of?
It's neuroplasticity because we do work with your brain. But not, I think from what I understand, neuroplasticity is you say certain things to kind of gear yourself towards.
Well, it's kind of along the same lines from what my experiences with it is that it just really changes your thought patterns. It helps you to, change you're pretty much what you're describing, which is, where you have these thoughts and you have these patterns and you have these cycles, which I can identify with that for sure. And this modality helps you to not just stop thinking those thoughts, but actually replacing those thoughts so that it's something of a negative feeling can become more of a positive or neutral. Okay. That's what I thought. Yeah. It's a great practice. I use it myself. It's great. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Works.
It really does.
It really situation.
It really does. It really does. And it probably, one thing that I find challenging for me is before I really started the healing process, I believe for me that I had to go through a certain amount of healing before I could even start growing and do this kind of work. And so for those of us, for those of you, I guess, that are at the beginning of your healing, this is a tool that can be used, but you do need to have a coach with you to do it. But, and your coach will tell you, but you do have to have a measure of healing before you can actually go through this. Do you agree with that?
I do. I agree. Because it's not so much as just convincing, I want that, and I'm just going to keep repeating that.
Right. You're not just going to think really it into existence. You're not going to say it enough times and it'll happen. It really is a process, but you do have to have a measure of healing before you can get to the place where you can work with that. I know that was true for me, because if you would have tried this on me back 20 years ago, it would have never worked. I would have fought you the whole way. I was in victim mindset. I was really in victim mindset. So, I wanted to stay there probably, I'm sure, at the time. So
it's probably comfortable.
Yeah. And I call it, I was comfortably uncomfortable. That's exactly what I was. Because I could see the patterns, I could see the cycles, I could see the behavior, but I couldn't see how to stop it. That's what was so frustrating for me. That's a really frustrating. It's bad enough when you don't realize what you're doing, but it's even worse when you see it but you can't stop it. So,
Yes.
okay, well, I think we've clarified that. Excuse me. So let's talk about defining covert narcissistic mothers.
hmm So I think we should start with the difference
Okay, let's
between
start there.
covert
Yeah,
and
that's fine.
overt. Is that okay? Okay. So narcissism is when you think of a narcissist, it's someone who's always me, I, it's all about me. So then it brings us to just the overt, the really obvious, grandiose type of like, hey, you can spot them. Someone who is always on the podium, wants to be heard, always getting attention. The benefit, you can see that when they make decisions, it always benefits them. And it's so obvious. That's why it's the overt type. So the covert type of narcissism is what I didn't even know existed because I thought there was only just one kind. So it's more subtle, and you don't really know that they're narcissists
Right.
because they present as good people. They're doing things for the community, everyone loves them, and they show this enormous concern for people. So it's really it's the altruistic type of
I
narcissism.
was married to one.
You don't realize that it's yes, you don't realize that they're narcissists until you start noticing these patterns. It's not just one incident. It's the pattern of like, wait a minute, why are they like this in public, but then at home they're different? And why do I feel this way? And why does it feel like in the relationship that I have with them, him or her, it's always one-sided? And yet out in the community and when people are watching, they
Yep.
glow and they make you diminish your light. So now going back to what's a covert narcissistic mother is this is the type of mother that may appear overly concerned for her children, but only because
They have a
they're her
job. They have a job
extensions.
in her life.
And they yes, yes. And they're pawns, they always take credit, and you are this way because I did this for you. And there's a sense of indebtedness. Um the normal responsibility of a mother is the children are made to feel like they owe their mother that, but they shouldn't. And everything is conditional. It's like when I decide to have kids, I don't see them as, oh, that's my retirement plan someday, and I'm going to make sure that that they're this and this and this because they're going to make me look good, and they have no voice, and I'm just going to tell them what to do, and they're going to do it. And if they don't, I'm going to remind them that
Right. They
they're
owe
here
me. They
because
owe
of
me.
me. And yes, and mothers don't do that. It's like, I want to have kids because I want someone to love. You don't think of the other way around. It's you don't produce something to
Right.
get something out of it. Because motherhood is supposed to be unconditional and you're there for your children. But it's subtly different for a covert narcissist. And the children start noticing it later on in life, like, wait a minute, she talks the talk,
Right.
but then why do I feel like crap? Why do I feel shamed? Why do I feel guilty all the time? Why can't I express my thoughts without being shamed by it or being
It's
told that I'm wrong?
Yep.
It's called
And I say
gaslighting.
that, these children are born with a job for the mother, and they're there to make the mom look good,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a job
Yes.
and make mama look good.
And the mother, hmm and the mother assigns certain roles to the children. So one is the golden child. That's the one who's up in the pedestal, can't do any wrong. That's the mom's sidekick, basically, the right hand. And everyone's compared to that golden child. But just because that person is the golden child doesn't mean they
Right.
have a good life either, because they're in this,
Right.
they have the golden
There's
handcuffs.
expectations of them. There is absolute expectations of them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then the rest of the siblings actually resent or even hate that golden child because, oh, you're the favorite child. You get everything. We're the workers and we have to do this. And yet you're sitting there and you're exempt from everything. So then that's the triangulation that happens between the children. And the mother actually divides the children. She assigns certain roles to the children, the golden child and then the scapegoat. And by doing that, then she is able to control them separately, because if they get together and they figure out that, wait, our mom's a
Right.
narcissist, then the mom loses control
Right.
and loses the
Right.
power to
And then there's
manipulate them.
resentment growing up with these kids. They they hate each other, right? They end up hating each other. And then they don't
They
believe,
do.
like the one child that I know this to be true. The one child that recognizes the narcissistic behavior and maybe had it done more to them than the others, and the others don't see it at all. And well, I wasn't raised like that. Mom wasn't like that. She didn't do that. That's even more confusing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So yeah, it's really, and you don't notice it. A lot of times siblings don't realize until they get older. I was listening to a different podcast where a sister sent in a story. So there's three of them. There's three sisters, and they grew
Mm.
up hating each other. But then they got together, and then they were honest with each other, like, well, I don't like you because you said this, and mom said this.
Mhm.
So when they finally figured out that their mom was instigating the chaos between the three of them, then they're like, oh my goodness, I love you and I shouldn't be hating you. And why
Mhm.
did our mother do this to us? So that's when they came into the conclusion that
Mhm.
their mom's a covert
And I'll
narcissist.
share with you about my mom. And it really took me just in the last few years to really realize, kind of putting the whole story together of why she treated me the way she did. And I understand it now. It's not okay. But, as a little girl, I was a blonde little
Hmm.
girl. I had my long curly hair, blue eyes. She loved dressing me up. I mean, every holiday I was completely decked out. I was in ballet and tap, and, she loved all that stuff. And I loved it too. I loved Easter time. We were going to go shopping and I'm going to get a whole new outfit. And she loved that. And then what was interesting is around probably between 11 and 12 years old, I started emotionally eating. I didn't realize it at the time that's what it was at all. I mean, it took me a long time to figure that out, but I did. So after dinner, I would just eat until I went to sleep. I would just graze, I called it. And I started putting weight on. And so by the time I was in 8th grade, I was chubby. I definitely was overweight. And then she turned on me because my job that I had for her, I couldn't fulfill that job anymore. I couldn't be that cute little girl. And she really, I mean, she got vicious and told me to lose weight. I didn't know how though. I didn't know how I gained the weight and I didn't know how to lose the weight. And then she gave me an ultimatum and said, she's not going to buy me any more clothes until I lose the weight. And she stuck to her guns. She stuck to her guns. I still didn't know how to lose weight. I didn't know how to fix it, and nobody was helping me. And so what ended up happening is my dad got tired of me wearing one pair of shorts and one shirt and took me down and bought me clothes. But it was interesting how I was favored until I was no longer.
Until you don't serve her purpose anymore.
Yeah. It was very confusing.
Yeah. So yeah, I bet it was, and I'm sorry that happened to you. It's like you said, you don't know
Hmm.
until the tables are turned,
Yeah.
until you're not fulfilling that role anymore and they're not
I
getting
know,
anything
but and
out
you're a
of
kid,
you.
and I mean,
So
how could you
then,
ever figure that out? I mean, it's horrible.
yes, exactly, it is. Because as a child, all you want is your mom's attention, your mom's love, and you'll do
Hmm.
anything to
Hmm.
win that.
Except lose weight because I didn't know how. It's crazy. That's crazy. So what do you suggest? Because when you become an adult and you realize this, and you still have a narcissistic mom, right? What do you say to your clients? How do you help
Hmm.
coach them through that?
So for me, the way when I realized it is, I mean, people were telling me your mom's a narcissist, and I was like, no, she's not. She's very helpful. She goes to church every day. She's blah blah, all these things. And then I started an online business, and I've always been a high achiever. I've always gone to school, raised kids, and worked, and like all like I'm on overdrive. And I took this neuro coaching program because I wanted to be more productive. And that's why I'm such a believer in neurocoaching, because it drilled down to like, why am I not being productive? Why am I doing this? Why am I procrastinating? And oh my gosh, it all comes down to like, because of how my childhood was, and how like, and every time like the common theme that kept coming up was, well, my mother said this, my mother made me feel this way, and I can't do this because of
There you
her.
go. There's the link.
And then I was like, well, yes. And then it's like, well, why? So then I still wasn't aware of what a covert narcissist is until, because it was painful. I felt like my chest was about, it's like always
Mm.
exploding. I couldn't say anything. And then there was a lot of guilt. And like even my friend was telling me, I mean, look at this diagnosis. We went to the American Psychological Association website. Look at this, like that meets like with your mother. And I was like, oh, okay, well, and then it says the covert narcissist, like checks all the boxes. And then I was in adoration one day. I spent an hour in adoration, like really just in pain, praying like, why, why she said this, why is this, and like I can't figure it out. And then my phone sent a notification. I don't have notifications on my phone. Like it's off, especially when I'm at adoration. It's on silent and notifications are off. And then something dinged, and it's like, why is that happening? So I looked up my phone, and the notification was someone posted that says, for daughters of covert narcissistic mothers, this is the book that
Oh,
helped me
there's an
and may
answer.
help you. Yes. So I was like, oh my goodness. So I took a screenshot of it and I said, okay, when I'm done here, when I leave, I'm going to buy that book. So as soon as I left, my hour was done. I bought the audiobook and I listened to it. It's only 2 hours. I could have written that book
You had your
myself.
aha moment.
And that was my aha moment. So now I'm writing my book, because if someone's, I mean, just that little notification, I felt like the veil was lifted. Like when before you get glasses,
Yes.
you think that was normal. Oh, that tree it's not really pretty. Oh, that's blurry,
Right.
and you think that's just how everything is. And then you go to the optometrist and they measure you and you get
I see
glasses
so
and you're
clearly
like, oh
now.
my goodness, I can see. I see so
Yeah.
clearly. And that's how it felt. It's so liberating when like I finally have the answers. But I mean, that's just the
Yeah.
first part of the
Yes.
healing. Awareness
Yeah.
is just one part, because then you have to deal with, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
what do I need to do after? How do I deal with the guilt? How do I deal with the conditioning that's like ingrained in me
Mm-hmm.
since childhood? And you still doubt yourself, like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if it's a sin to
Oh.
even think that she's that way? So yeah, so that's when you come down to, I mean, still like, asking for support, journaling, therapy, and just really every time I get these feelings of, well, what if you're wrong? I just go straight to the facts. That's where it's really important to
Yes.
separate your emotions from what you're thinking in your head, and then you look at the facts. Because when I look at the facts and look at all the instances that led to me concluding
Mm-hmm.
that she's the way she is, it's like you're saying, like you see it, like you see the roses are red, but you like, no, what
Right.
if it's
Right.
black?
Because that's the thing when a narcissistic relationship, I mean, and I've said this so many times, and until you have been in one, you have no idea what it's like to be in one.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of questioning yourself. That's, and that's part of their, I call it grooming. They're grooming you. It's part of what they do to break you down.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I love that you said that, because
Mm-hmm.
that is so true. When you start questioning, because what you were doing is, I guess one of the things too is we set boundaries, right? We begin to set boundaries with a narcissist, and with that is guilt.
Yes.
Sometimes we'll feel guilty for setting boundaries,
Yes.
especially with the mom. But you have a really good
Mm-hmm.
point. Go back to the facts, take the emotions and set them aside, and just look at the facts, and you will see the facts will speak very loudly for you, and it'll bring you back to that place of, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
do need to set these boundaries, and I need to enforce these boundaries, and I cannot feel guilty. I can't.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because, like, now being a mother, if my children refuse to do something, or like they don't want,
Being a kid.
for some reason, just something, they don't agree with me, being a kid, I don't go around to where, how can I make them feel guilty so they'll do what I want?
No,
I just
no.
don't. Like, thank goodness I don't. And then to think that, well, then why does my mother
Hmm.
default to that? So so that's when we go into the stopping the cycle of generational trauma, because if you don't know that it's wrong, that your normal upbringing was wrong, you're going
Right.
to repeat that to your children. So then you're creating another generation of, like, you, who's guilty, ashamed. I mean, not guilty, made to feel
Hmm.
guilty all the time. They're ashamed, they don't have confidence, they can't move forward, and they're just, having difficulty in life, and you're thinking that's just how it is. No, it's not. It's time to take a stand,
It
and it's
is.
time
And,
to break that cycle.
and this, I discovered this for myself, and I can tell you it was really empowering. And you're right, is, is that we only do what we know and what we were taught, and we respond the only way that we know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's our normal. And so we need to
Yes.
find our new normal. But we need to understand too,
Mm-hmm.
that people hurt people because they're hurting. And this was really
Yes.
freeing for me, because all of a sudden what it did is it took away the belief system that I had about myself, which was I was a mistake. I was weird. I'm different than
Mm-hmm.
anybody else in the world. There's nobody else like me. I'm weird. All these things that I used to say about myself. And it breaks that. It breaks that because all of a sudden it really puts into perspective that it really is that person's fault that they abused me. It really is their fault. It's not because of me. They
Mm-hmm.
did it because they're hurting. It doesn't make it okay. That's not what I'm saying. It does not make it okay.
Yes.
But the truth is,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you can agree with this, we're both much healthier people today. And the last thing we ever want to do is hurt someone. And then when we
Mm-hmm.
realize that we have hurt someone, we go and restore that. Right.
Yes. Especially if the people
Mhm.
you're hurting are your children and the people who are depending on you
Right.
to protect
Right.
them and love
And
them.
so, and I discovered this about my mom. I mean, I knew my dad was abused as a child. He left home at 14. I didn't know about my mom's history. And when I discovered her history about 3 or 4 years ago, my heart broke, because she too was definitely abused in more ways than one. Just by looking at her history, because we looked up her history, like on Ancestry, and we could just, when you follow the story, you can see. And
Okay.
I know my grandma had been married many times, and
Mm-hmm.
there were a lot of bad things about her. So I know my mom had abuse, and but both my parents carried it on and just passed it along. But the benefit that we have now is that we
Mm-hmm.
have this awareness, we have techniques,
Yes.
and we have ways of helping people to manage their trauma and
Mm-hmm.
childhood abuse.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's knowledge really is the first step, and then accepting that is is the second step. Because, okay, you know it, that's what it is. Are you okay with accepting that? And then it's with the empowerment that comes with that knowledge, you really have to find the strength to even
Yeah.
want to change that. Because some people think that, well, I turned out okay despite this, and that's her favorite. Every time I tell her, this and this, I try to talk to her, and she's like, well, we turned out okay, we got through this and this and this, and it's like,
You
that's
survived
not what
it.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah. You got through it.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but it's not okay, and I don't want
Mm-mm.
to pass that on
No.
to my
And
children.
I even seriously considered not having children, because I was
I've heard
aware at
that
like
from
17,
other.
18 years. I was aware that I was abused. And I don't know how I was aware of the fact that I knew that it could be passed on. Somehow I had awareness of that. And so I was really worried about that, and thought I shouldn't have children. And I had to really work with myself and God gave me one child. He gave me one really good one. And I was very protective over him. I still messed up. I still made mistakes. I didn't abuse him, but he was raised in a home with a lot of strife from his parents. So I had to own up to that. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I broke it.
The
Yeah.
difference is you're owning up to it, and
Yeah.
you're breaking it. You're not using your past. Well, I was raised this way and I was this way, so you're lucky I didn't
Yeah.
do these. It's like when people tell you you're lucky to be around me, you're lucky I did this
Yeah.
for you. It's
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a big
Yeah.
red flag.
Yeah. Exactly. No, yeah. I mean, we're supposed to teach our children, right? We're supposed to raise them in the way that they go, and we're
Mhm.
supposed to teach them. And it's a huge responsibility.
Yes.
And I just, that was something that I did have at the forefront of my mind. And when I realized that, even though I didn't directly abuse my son, but that I did raise him in a home that was like that, it was really heartbreaking. I took a moment and I really felt like a failure. I
Mhm.
really did. I thought, God, I focused so hard on protecting him. I even protected him from my brother. It got to the point where I wouldn't let my brother around him. So I was diligent in that. I was
Mhm.
diligent in school when, some parents were picking on him. There was these things that I did that weren't done for me, but I missed the other one.
Oh, okay. What did you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can ask, I'm curious now, because you said you did like the protection, but then like it's almost like you went gung ho one way, but
I
then like what did you
missed what I
miss?
missed is stopping the yelling that my husband and I did during the marriage. And that's what happened. I mean,
Okay.
there were times where I realized as we were arguing that it's loud enough that Corey can hear this. And this is not okay. But you're in the heat of the
Mm.
moment, and I was in survival mode. I was 100% in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
It does not excuse any of my behavior, but it explains
Mm-hmm.
why I behaved the way I did. And so being in survival mode, I was already
Mm-hmm.
anxious and fearful, and all these emotions were right there. And then if something happened, it didn't take much for me to blow. And so that happened. You could imagine. And my then husband and I, it was not a
Yeah.
healthy marriage. It was not a good marriage for either one of us. Um, and so I was
Mm-hmm.
protective of Corey that way and making sure nobody else hurt him. And I made sure I was really careful how I interacted with him, but I didn't stop that part of it. And that is not a healthy, loving, safe, comfortable home to be raised in. And it does create trauma. He may not have been abused, but there absolutely was
Mm-hmm.
trauma. There was trauma.
Yes. It's Yeah. That's why it's really important for us to heal
Right.
first within us. Because, like, if you know what you need to heal from, but if you don't do the healing within yourselves, there's a lot of things that you don't
Yes.
notice that can
Yes.
come out and
Yes.
hurt who you're
And,
protecting.
that's why, I started my healing journey at 19. I'm now 60, so it's been a long journey, right?
Oh, good for
But
you.
most of my
Hey.
healing really has happened over the last probably 15 years because there's so much more awareness out there. And there's so much more information about trauma. And we
Mm-hmm.
now know how it affects our body, how it affects our mind, and that we can actually heal from it,
Yes.
that we don't have to live with this trauma the rest of our life. We can learn to manage it. And I didn't have that then. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're right. And as parents, we don't want to pass this down. And I had a conversation with my son, and he's so sweet, and we're working on it. And he, of course he forgave me, but it's just the damage is done. The damage is done, but the awareness will help.
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, the awareness makes me realize, it helps me pay attention to my behavior and be aware of it. And so when I catch myself going in
Mm-hmm.
that direction, I can stop it. Or if I screw up, I can go and
Yeah.
fix it.
I think a lot. Yeah. Yes, and there's a lot of beautiful things there too. You're aware of it. You're willing to take the extra step to have that conversation with your son. And then there's forgiveness. And it's like, that's really, it's almost like you have closure now. The job's not done, but you
Yes.
have that closure. A lot of parents, they don't even want to hear their children talk to them. They don't, like, let alone ask for forgiveness. Like, my mom would walk away, stomp away. It's like, don't even talk to me. I can't even believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
And
After
then,
all the
like,
things I did for
boom,
you.
throw a tantrum like a child. Yeah. So it's like, okay. So, yeah. So it's like the fact that you're able to to have that conversation with your son and ask for forgiveness, and he was able to forgive you. I
Yeah.
think that's a really beautiful start of
Yeah.
healing, or
It
part of your
really, I
healing.
mean, it took me a while to forgive myself for it. It really did. I think I'm there, but it took a while because once I realized, oh, that was heartbreaking for a few days. I'm telling you, it really broke my heart because I was so mad at myself because I thought I tried so
Hmm.
hard, but that just is an example of what happens when we haven't had healing. So let me ask you this. So
Hmm.
when you're talking about, the narcissistic mother, like you said, you can't talk to her. You cannot talk to a narcissist and explain to them how what they're doing hurts me. They don't care and they will always twist it. And all of a sudden you're the bad guy.
Hmm.
So I mentioned earlier, setting boundaries,
Hmm.
but what have you done to help manage? I mean, do you still have a
Hmm.
relationship with your mother? And if you do, how do you manage that? Because that's a tough one. I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's different when it's, someone that's not a family member, because you can cut them off. And I'm not saying you can't cut off family members, because I've actually cut off my brother. Um, but there needs to be steps
Hmm.
done before you get to the point of actually cutting somebody off, right?
Yes. So, like, little bits of conversation. And I mean, like, you always want to give them a chance. There's this hope inside you
Yes.
that you're hoping you're wrong. And so if that doesn't happen, you always look for, like, almost breadcrumbs, like,
Yes.
just give me something, right? To give me something to work with. So if you don't see that, and it's like, okay, you come to this conclusion that, all right, I mean, I can't turn my back on you, although some children do. Some children actually, like,
Yeah.
peace out. But I can't do that. So I'm
Yeah.
very limited, and I don't fall for the traps anymore. I can see where the conversation is going, and I can see what's about to be said and what's going to happen next, and I just don't get
That's
emotional
really
over it
interesting you said,
anymore.
because they do have a
Like when.
pattern. They do. And when you
Hmm.
figure out what their
Hmm.
pattern is, it's really easy to predict what they're going to do. And then it makes it easier for you to manage it.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So when you see those patterns and you can feel yourself, like, getting emotional, that's like, thank you, neurocoaching, for me. Again, when I do feel I've worked through this mnemonic that we have, and I'm like, wow. It's sometimes I even stump myself, like, because in the past, certain situation that would just, like, ruin my day, or rile me up, or I'll give in and I'll be mad at myself,
Yep.
like, why did I do that? But now, like, something transpired, not just recently, but fairly recent, and it was like the beginnings of drama and chaos, and I, like, squashed that, and I was telling my best friends, like, I squashed that in less than 24 hours, and now I'm okay.
Yay, you.
Yay me.
And it's empowering, isn't it? Because
It
that's
is,
one
it
of the feelings
is.
I used to feel with my late husband, the narcissist, is that um, I just feel helpless. I'd want to literally, sounds terrible, but I'd literally want to walk up to him and thunk him between the eyes with my, what is wrong with you? Like, this is just crazy stuff coming out of your, why are you, I would
Hmm.
say to, why are you creating drama and chaos? Life brings enough. Why? But that's their
Hmm.
norm. That is their norm.
It is, because it's their world. It's their world. No one else matters. And anything they can do
Hmm.
to get that attention, whether it's, like, positive attention, they're being praised for something good, or negative attention to where people are feeling bad for them, that they're in this victim mode. Oh, look at me. Someone help me. I can't do this. for myself. So someone swoop in, I'm the damsel in distress. And so like some narcissists actually even get sick
Ooh.
on purpose. It's so sad that they get sick on purpose because they get attention from the sympathy that people are feeling bad for them because they're
Hmm.
sick. That's
Oh yes, Munchausen's
Munchausen.
disease.
And then there's another
Yeah,
type of Munchausen. Yeah. So there's
by
Munchausen, and then
proxy.
there's Munchausen by proxy, which is really, really terrible. They make the children sick so the
Right,
mother gets the
right,
sympathy.
right.
And so the Munchausen is when they get
Yeah,
themselves sick.
interesting. Anything to get attention. And I had a guest on here,
Yes.
Dr. Susan Spicer. Her podcast is coming out soon. And she's got a PhD, she's a trauma specialist. And we were talking about narcissism. And, I've studied it a lot, and I'm not an expert, but I've studied it a lot. And, when you start studying this stuff, you start seeing kind of the commonalities. And one of the things that I heard a lot of is,
Yes.
oh, narcissists never change. They never change. And I had heard that. And she had a really interesting spin on it. She said, narcissists are actually on a spectrum. And she said, you can have the narcissist who, from their childhood abuse or whatever. And it's not a real bad form of narcissism, I guess is the best way to put it, but that they can be worked with. You go to the other end of the spectrum and it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
personality disorder, and you're not going to get healed.
Yes.
You're not going to get healed. And you see, I think a lot
Mm-hmm.
of what we see is more on that spectrum, that end of the spectrum where it's over the top. I mean, I just watched a Netflix docuseries on, I forget what the doctor's name is, and I didn't know this story at all, but this guy went so far, he's a surgeon. He went so far as to create a replaceable windpipe when people lose their windpipe, and having the body accept it through using their stem cells. So they would take a piece of plastic and pour stem
Okay.
cells on it and think that it's going to work, right? And all these people thought he was
Mm-hmm.
wonderful. Super long story short, no, he ended up killing a lot of people. But then on the personal side, what he did with his girlfriends, I mean, it was so over the top. And I remember sitting there thinking, how could they not like investigate this guy? Like, why did she believe everything that he had to say? And I was in a narcissistic relationship, but it was so over the top of how far this guy went. I mean, he even told his girlfriend, or his fiance at the time, the Pope was going to marry them. She believed him. She believed him that
Oh.
the Pope was going to marry them, that he knew all these people, that he was the personal doctor of the Pope. I mean, he went that far, and people believed him. And of course, finally, when, there gets to a point where the narcissist's lies start to show, and she finally started investigating after she quit her
Mm-hmm.
job and did all this stuff. And then she found out all this stuff wasn't true. He is a doctor. That's the only thing that's true. But that's the
Mm-hmm.
far end of the spectrum. And you also have the narcissists who end up ending people's lives. But there is a spectrum, I mean, and so I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, another common theme for narcissists
Yeah.
is they're very charismatic people. They're very charming. They are full of charisma. That's why it's so difficult for the children to even, come out and say that my parents are narcissists, because
Yeah.
there's the backlash from the community saying that, wow, I thought like she did everything for you,
Yep.
or your dad did everything for you, and blah 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 blah. So then there's the invalidation that comes from the people that surrounds them, because they
Correct.
don't know. They're treated
That
differently.
is such a trait of a narcissist. I used to call it just passive aggressive behavior, which it is passive aggressive behavior, but it's narcissistic behavior as well. And
It is, yeah.
that is what creates such chaos for the person who's having this done to them, because like you say, behind closed doors, they're one way, and then in front of everybody else, they're loved, they're wonderful, and in front of everybody else too, they treat the person really well so that everybody else doesn't know. And I think that's a struggle I'm having in my family, is nobody knew how my parents were. Nobody knew how my family was. I even a few years ago asked one of my family members if they knew what was going on. They said, well, we knew your parents had problems with your brother, but they had no idea the degree of it. And my mom was beloved and she had a lot of friends and the family loved her because she's the one that put all the family gatherings together, and our house was a house that all her girlfriends would come over in the morning and they'd have their coffee and cigarettes and sit around the coffee, and have their coffee and cigarettes together. And so she was very loved. And I didn't realize the depth of my mother until over the last few years. So it's strange that it becomes our normal, like what we were talking about earlier. It becomes our normal. And it isn't until we see someone else's life and see what's going on in their life that we go, wait a minute. That doesn't match up to my life.
Yeah. And then you start questioning yourself, like, I'm wrong, because if your mother's doing all these things and she's beloved by everyone, then there must be something wrong with you, because you're thinking that she's something else.
I still don't like saying this, but I remember as a child thinking, I love my mom. I don't like her though. She's mean. It's interesting. Yeah, this is really interesting. So let's talk about breaking the generational trauma, because we kind of touched on it a little bit. You and I both are making efforts to break that. What are some other things that we can do in breaking generational trauma?
So when you heal, you actually remember all those things as a child, right? How it made you feel and what happened then. If you put yourself, in your children's position, do you want them to feel how you were made to feel when you were at that age?
That's a big one. That was the one that motivated me.
Yeah, like for me, my son actually started telling me. He told me something that my mother said to him, and like to me, it was like a light bulb. Like, whoa, she said the same thing to me, did the same thing to me, at that almost same age, and then that's when I was like, oh gosh, yeah, okay, no.
Yeah, I did that with my brother, because when my son was about 8 or 9 years old, my brother came over to visit, and Corey wanted to open the door. So he walked over to the door and opened it. And my brother walked in the door and out of the blue just took my son's hand and wrenched it behind his back and held him and was like trying. Yeah. That was I was like, oh no, stop that right now. And the look on my son's face, because nobody's ever done that to him. Right. And the look on his face, that was it. From that point on, he was never allowed around my son. See, so I did some of the right things. Yeah. I did some of the right things.
You did.
Yeah. So
you did. You probably did more than what
I think so. I have to be careful of, like I've done all my life, is not beating myself up all the time. And, I can't go back and change it, but I can certainly make the future different.
Yeah. But if you think about it too, that's part of your conditioning, that it's your fault.
Right. Everything was my fault. I should have known. That was the thing. I should have known. How did I not know? It's very frustrating. So what is your relationship now like with your mom? I mean, how do you manage it?
I mean, I'll still take care of her if she needs. I'll be there if she needs me, but it has to be truly needed, not to where I'm very selective to like with contact and what to say, because I'm a nurse practitioner, so I know, like, if an illness is real.
Gotcha. Yeah. If she's trying to draw you in or not.
And I know, like, yep, I do. And then I talk, and having the support as well, like talking to people like you, and just being open now, talking to people. And once you start talking about it, you'll realize that certain people who went through the same thing, you see like almost a relief in them, that,
yes,
oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Can I tell you about this too? This is also my experience. I am actually on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter. It's called Freedom from Narcissists. And it comes out every 2 weeks. And so for Mother's Day, I wrote a newsletter um, healing the mother wound on Mother's Day. And that's when I knew that what I'm doing is right and that I should keep doing what I'm doing, increasing awareness. Because someone reached out to me. Someone sent me a message and said, I'm having a hard time. It's Mother's Day because this happened to me. And then this is my first year realizing that my mom's a covert narcissist. But by reading your post, it gave me peace. So thank you for giving me,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm getting emotional. Thank you for giving me peace on
Wow,
Mother's
that's
Day.
big.
So that's, it is. So I'm like, okay, there's someone out there. As I always say, even if I can just help one person, if I can give someone peace, that's one mother who will find peace. That's one mother who will be different to her child. And that's one child who's not going to hurt,
Suffer.
who's not going to suffer from the generational trauma. And I just hope and pray that it multiplies
That's
from there.
beautiful. And I want to say to the audience, and I think I said it earlier, that it doesn't matter who the abuser is. If they're continuing to abuse you, you have the absolute right to cut ties with them. It doesn't matter if it's a family member or a friend or what. You need to protect yourself. And when I said that story about my son and my brother, I cut my brother, I wouldn't allow my brother around my son anymore. And after a while I cut ties with him, and I felt guilty for a long time. I felt really, really guilty. And I thought, oh, what kind of person am I that, I'm cutting off a family member? And I just carried this heavy guilt. And I've mentioned before that I co-facilitated a childhood abuse healing workshop, but I took it first several years before. And so when I went through it, one of the most freeing things that I got in that whole workshop was, and she was talking about forgiveness this particular night. And what she said, I agree with, which is, forgiving the other person is for me. It has nothing to do with them. It doesn't dismiss what they did. It doesn't diminish what they did. What it does for me is it keeps me from carrying that anger and having it turn into bitterness and then resentment. So she was talking about that. I'm like, okay, I follow that. And then she said the part that really freed me, and that was, we are called to forgive them. However, if they're still being abusive, you do not need to reconcile with them. And I think I audibly went, like, that hit me really, like, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm all right. I did make the right choice, even though I felt guilty. I don't know how many years it was. It was probably 2 or 3 years that I felt so guilty about that. And that really freed me. And we don't need to be in relationships with them if they're continuing to abuse us. If it's a narcissistic situation where you can manage it, that's one thing. But if they are still being flat out abusive, you can make the choice, if you so choose to take a break from them.
Yes.
It's not easy, though.
It's not. And that's why I actually include faith in my coaching, because a lot of people, you keep
Right.
looking for answers, right? You look for, are they sick? That's why they're acting this way. They don't feel good. What's happening in their life? Were they abused when they were a child? That's why they're acting this
Yeah.
way. Is it menopause?
Yeah. There's a chemical imbalancement.
Is it? Yeah, exactly. Like for me, I'm always investigating, like, what if it's something physiological? What if it's the diet? What if it's the water? Right? Um, but like, looking at the facts is, so I have the factual evidence, but I still have that guilt in me. Like, so for me, I found more peace in associating it with, with God's word, looking at the Bible. Because God, so there's a difference between, what's the word? Conviction and guilt. God does not want you to feel guilty all the time. He doesn't like bog you down and shame you. You're so bad. You are this,
Right.
and
He does
I
not
don't love
have
you anymore.
conditional love.
Nope, he does not. And you have to believe that God will not create a person And he wouldn't want you to put yourself in that situation for a person to keep abusing you and treat you that way when God himself loves you
It
unconditionally.
hurts him.
And when you want to back to the conviction, when you make a mistake, God doesn't want you to stay in that place of I am unworthy, I don't deserve to be loved, and I am just this, I'll just stay here in the dark. Well, you know what? Jesus died for you to save you, so you are worthy.
Yeah.
So why would one person make you feel not worthy and demand conditional love from you when Jesus himself is not like that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I agree. So let me ask you one more question. What do you want to leave our listeners with?
Gosh, there's so many things. I'm gonna try to pick just one. So I'm gonna stick with my three main the main things for the covert narcissist is we need to define what's happening, increase awareness, and then once you know what you're dealing with, then we need to defeat it. And how do you defeat that? You go to your resources, you start your healing, and then you thrive. You thrive with your relationships, you thrive with your family. So those are the three steps. And then hopefully once you've walked through those steps, you're healed, then you have now the courage and the power within you to protect the next generation. Whether you have your own children, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your friends, you just have to break that cycle and move forward. This get out of that place of chaos and negativity and create your own, bright future where you're thriving, where you're reaching out to people, where you're reaching out, giving people peace in their hearts, where you're, spreading your healing in however way, because that's your, and really it's beautiful once you've walked through that. It's like you found a new purpose. So your suffering is not in vain. It's like, okay, my experience is now your manual.
Exactly.
And you just hand it to the next person.
That's a good way to put it. That's exactly it. I love that. Yeah. We don't need to suffer. We've suffered long enough.
And you don't need to make people suffer because you're suffering.
And coming from someone who did this a lot, cleaning up your mess that you make along the way is not fun. It is not fun. I hate it. So I try to do everything I can not to ever hurt someone.
Yeah, good for you. It's really you have your increased awareness right there.
Awareness is golden, I'm telling you. Well, one last thing. There's one more thing. So why don't you let the audience know how they can reach you? I'll have all this information, of course, for everybody to click on, all your links and everything. But why don't you share with the audience how they can reach out to you?
So you can go to my website. It's called Blueveilwellness.com, and that's where I have my resources. I have a quiz there, and I would like to invite you to take that quiz. If you're ever wondering that, is my mom a narcissist? Is my partner a narcissist? Or what is it? And where you are in that journey, if you're ready to take the next step, take that quiz, and then we'll see where you are.
That's nice. And what's the name of the quiz again?
Yeah. I don't have my own site to it. I will give you I have to get the site.
Sounds good. That's so funny. No problem.
Yeah, but it will be on that website. And I actually also launched a podcast. It's called Maternal Narcissism Unmasked. I actually just put up my first episode.
Oh, congratulations. That's exciting. Nice. Get that information out there. And it's funny because when I was married to my narcissist late husband, I knew the behavior was crazy, but I didn't know what the name was. I didn't really, and then later on when I started, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what that was. That's so crazy. Yeah.
Yes. And another thing too is you mentioned you're married to a narcissist and your mom's a narcissist. You actually attract those type of people. If you were raised by a narcissist, you have the certain behaviors that narcissists
Yep.
hone into. You're like a beacon. I was raised by a narcissist and I act this way.
Yeah.
And the narcissist is like, okay, easy to control.
Exactly.
Easy to manipulate.
And you know what makes me mad that they do too? And my ex or my late husband did this. They get all the goods on you. They let you spill your guts out. And I thought I was in a safe space and I'm sharing my life with him. And then he turned around and when it was convenient for him, he would use it against me.
It's actually a stage called love bombing when they win you over and you just like spill everything and you think,
I'm so safe. I'm in a good place.
I'm so safe.
Oh my gosh. Yep. And you know what?
Love bombing.
Here's the key. I knew when I met him, I wasn't supposed to talk to him. I wasn't, and I started talking to him. I mean, my intuition, don't talk to him. I went and talked to him. Don't date him. I dated him. Don't marry him. And I married him. And I know why I did it. And I did it because I still had that mindset in my mind that I had to find somebody that loved me. Because nobody liked me. And he was a good looking guy and he was responsible and he was funny, but he was charming, which we said earlier. Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for being on here and talking about this. And it's just getting more of that information out there that's going to help people have their aha aware moments.
I agree. Let's find your aha moment and then let's get you your power.
Exactly. Exactly. Ooh, I love that. That was beautiful. I couldn't have said that better myself. Well, thank you again for being on here. I appreciate it. And, to our listeners, if you are struggling with someone in your life that you think is a narcissist, go to her website, take the test. And if you know someone else who's maybe struggling with narcissism, share the podcast. We need to get this out there and help people. So thank you again.